The year was 2097, and Earth had grown quiet. The dreams of reaching the stars had faded long ago, replaced by struggles closer to home. Nations argued over borders, resources dwindled, and the environment teetered on the edge of collapse. Humanity had stopped looking up at the sky with hope. Instead, they looked down at their feet, trying to survive another day. But the universe does not wait for anyone. It began without warning. A shadow passed over the sun, or so it seemed. At first, people thought it might be a solar eclipse or some strange atmospheric phenomenon. Then came the reports from space stations orbiting Earth. Something massive was approaching. It wasn't natural. It was alien. By the time humanity realized what was happening, it was too late. From the darkness of space emerged an armada unlike anything ever seen. Thousands of ships filled the void above Earth, each one larger than any skyscraper. Their hulls shimmered with metallic blues and purples, glowing faintly as if lit from within. They moved in perfect formation, silent but menacing. This was no exploration mission. This was conquest. The leader of the fleet introduced himself through a transmission, broadcast across every channel on Earth. His name was Emperor Calver, ruler of the Zorethian Empire. His voice boomed with authority, cold and devoid of emotion. "We are the Zorethians," he declared. "Your planet will become part of our empire. Resistance is futile. Surrender now, or face annihilation." Panic swept across the globe like wildfire. Governments scrambled to respond, calling emergency meetings and deploying military forces. But there was no preparation for this. No drills, no contingency plans. Humanity's technology paled in comparison to the advanced weaponry of the invaders. Fighter jets took off into the skies, only to be vaporized in seconds by beams of light fired from the alien ships. Tanks rolled out on the battlefields, only to crumble under energy blasts that tore through steel like paper. Cities burned. One after another, metropolises fell victim to orbital bombardments. New York City disappeared in a flash of white-hot light. Tokyo collapsed into rubble. London became a smoldering ruin. The Zorethians showed no mercy. Their attacks were precise, calculated. Every strike brought them closer to total domination. Amidst the chaos, whispers began to spread about something buried deep beneath the surface of the Earth, something forgotten. Centuries earlier, during humanity's golden age of innovation, scientists had worked on a project so ambitious, so dangerous, that it was sealed away before it could ever be used. Rumors spoke of a weapon powerful enough to rival even the most advanced alien technology. Some called it Project Prometheus. Others simply referred to it as the Relic. Desperation drove leaders to consider the unthinkable. If such a weapon truly existed, it might be humanity's only chance. Orders were given to locate Vault Omega, a secret facility hidden far below Geneva, Switzerland. Teams of soldiers and scientists prepared to descend into the depths, hoping to find salvation in the form of ancient machinery. While preparations unfolded, Admiral Yarrick Voss stood aboard the last remaining human battleship in orbit. He watched as the Zorethian fleet loomed larger with each passing moment. Voss knew his fate. His ship, the Eclipse, was little more than a speck compared to the monolithic vessels surrounding it. Yet he refused to give up. "Not yet." Voss turned to his crew, his voice steady despite the odds. "We're going to hit them where it hurts," he said. "If we can take out their flagship, maybe we can buy some time for those on the ground." His plan was reckless, bordering on suicidal. The Eclipse would charge straight into the heart of the enemy fleet, firing everything it had until either the flagship fell or the Eclipse did. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. Voss gave the order, and the ship surged forward, engines roaring as it hurtled towards certain doom. Back on Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez led the team tasked with uncovering the relic. A brilliant astrophysicist with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, she carried the weight of billions on her shoulders. Her hands trembled slightly as she descended into Vault Omega, clutching a tablet displaying schematics of the facility. Behind her followed a group of engineers, soldiers, and technicians, all aware of the stakes. The vault was eerily silent, its walls lined with rusted metal and flickering lights. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, heavier. Finally, they reached the chamber housing the relic. Massive doors slid open with a groan, revealing rows of dormant satellites suspended in midair, connected by cables thicker than a man's arm. In the center of the room stood a control panel, covered in dust and blinking faintly. "This is it," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. Aegis. Project Prometheus had been designed to harness the power of the sun itself, converting solar energy into devastating weapons capable of obliterating entire fleets. But activating it wouldn't be easy. The system required an encryption key, fragments of which were scattered across the globe. Retrieving them would mean venturing into territories already claimed by the ZOR at HIAN-. As Elena studied the schematics, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Outside, the world continued to burn. She clenched her fists, determination hardening her expression. Humanity had always found ways to endure, to adapt, to fight back. Even now, amidst the ashes of cities and the cries of the dying, there was still hope. Earth would rise again, hope that humanity would prevail, and hope that the Zorathians would learn the hard way why. You never underestimate the spirit of a species, willing to risk everything for survival. Far above, the Eclipse charged forward, its guns blazing. The flagship loomed ahead, a behemoth surrounded by smaller escorts. Voss gritted his teeth, gripping the armrests of his command chair. "Fire everything," he shouted. Explosions lit up the darkness as missiles streaked toward the enemy fleet. The escort swarmed around the Eclipse, peppering it with laser fire. Alarms blared as shields failed and hull breaches erupted across the ship. Still, Voss held his course. Direct hit. Someone yelled. The flagship shuddered, its once impenetrable armor cracking under the assault. For a brief moment, victory seemed possible. Then, a retaliatory blast struck the Eclipse, tearing through its core. Lights flickered, and the ship began to break apart. Voss closed his eyes, knowing the end had come. But as the Eclipse disintegrated, he allowed himself a small smile. They had bought precious time. Time for Elena. Time for Aegis. Time for humanity to fight back. Somewhere below, in the depths of Vault Omega, Elena stared at the relic. She didn't know how much time they had left. But she knew one thing for certain. Earth wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. Not ever. And somewhere beyond the stars, the Zorathians prepared for the next phase of their invasion, unaware that humanity still had one card left to play, a forgotten weapon waiting to awaken. The air inside Vault Omega was heavy with anticipation. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in front of the relic, her mind racing. The weapon before her, Aegis, was humanity's last hope. But it wasn't ready. Not yet. The encryption key needed to activate it was missing, scattered across the globe in fragments hidden long ago. Without it, Aegis would remain nothing more than a dormant machine, useless against the Zorathian Armada. Elena glanced at the team behind her. Soldiers clutching rifles, engineers holding tablets filled with schematics, and technicians carrying tools strapped to their belts. They were tired, scared, and covered in dirt from their journey into the vault. Yet they stood ready, waiting for her next move. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. There was no time for doubt. "We need to find those fragments," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the task ahead. "Each piece is stored in a different location. Some are buried underground, others locked away in old military bases. We'll have to split up and retrieve them as fast as possible. Captain Marcus Kane stepped forward, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He was a soldier, through broad-shouldered, with a face hardened by years of combat. His eyes narrowed as he studied the map displayed on Elena's tablet. "This is insane," he muttered. "We're talking about going into enemy territory here. The Zorathians are everywhere. If we get caught, we don't have a choice," Elena interrupted, her tone sharp. "If we don't do this, Earth falls. It's that simple." Kane didn't argue further. Instead, he nodded grimly and began issuing orders to his men. Teams were organized, routes planned, and supplies distributed. Within minutes, the group had transformed from a disorganized assembly into a determined force, each member aware of the stakes as the teams prepared to leave. Elena lingered near the control panel, staring at the relic. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Outside, the world continued to burn. Cities crumbled under orbital bombardments, and millions fled in terror. Every second counted. The first fragment was located in an abandoned military bunker deep in the Siberian wilderness. The team assigned to retrieve it consisted of 3 soldiers and 1 engineer named Raj Patel. The journey there was brutal. Snowstorms raged around them, turning the landscape into a frozen wasteland. Their vehicles struggled through drifts of snow, engines groaning under the strain. When they finally reached the bunker, they found it guarded by Zorathian drones patrolling the perimeter. The creatures moved silently, their metallic bodies glinting in the dim light. The team huddled behind a ridge, watching as the drones scanned the area with glowing red sensors. "We can't fight them," Raj whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. "They'll tear us apart." "Then we sneak past them," replied Lieutenant Harper, the leader of the group. She pulled out a small device, a jammer designed to disrupt the drone systems. "Cover me while I plant this. Once it's active, we'll have 30 seconds to get inside." Harper crept forward, her movements slow and deliberate. The wind howled around her, masking the sound of her footsteps. She reached the base of the bunker and attached the jammer to the wall. A soft beep signaled its activation. Immediately, the drones froze, their sensors flickering erratically. "Go!" Harper shouted. The team sprinted toward the entrance, slipping inside just as the jammer's effect wore off. Behind them, the drones resumed their patrol, unaware that their prey had slipped through their grasp. Inside the bunker, the air was frigid and stale. The walls were lined with rusted metal, and the floor was littered with debris. Raj led the way, using his tablet to guide them deeper into the structure. Finally, they reached a reinforced door marked with a faded emblem of the United Nations. Raj entered a code into the keypad beside it, and the door hissed open. There, resting on a pedestal, was the first fragment. It looked unassuming, a small cube made of black glass, but the moment Raj touched it, he felt a surge of energy course through his fingers. He wrapped it carefully in cloth and tucked it into his pack. "Let's move," Harper said. "We've got what we came for." But as they turned to leave, the ground shook violently. Somewhere above, explosions echoed through the storm. The Zorathians knew they were there. Meanwhile, another team battled its way through the ruins of Tokyo. This fragment was hidden beneath the city's subway system, buried so deeply that even modern maps failed to show its existence. Leading the mission was Sergeant Mei Lin, a seasoned fighter known for quick thinking and unwavering courage. The streets above were a nightmare. Buildings lay in ruins, their skeletal remains reaching skyward like broken teeth. Fires burned unchecked, sending plumes of smoke into the air. Survivors huddled in makeshift shelters, their faces pale with fear. Mei and her team navigated the wreckage carefully, avoiding patrols of Zorathian ground troops. When they finally descended into the subway tunnels, the darkness enveloped them completely. Flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing twisted tracks and collapsed ceilings. "This place hasn't been touched in decades," May murmured, her voice echoing off the walls. "Be careful. It could collapse at any moment." They followed the map until they reached a sealed chamber. The door was massive, made of reinforced steel and locked with a biometric scanner. May pressed her palm against the panel, hoping the system still recognized human DNA. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a loud clunk, the door slid open. Inside, the fragment rested on a pedestal identical to the one in Siberia. May approached cautiously, her rifle raised. As she picked up the cube, a low hum filled the room. Lights blinked on overhead, illuminating the space for the first time in centuries. "Got it," May said, slipping the fragment into her pack. "Let's get out of here." But as they retraced their steps, they encountered a new threat: Zorathian shock troopers. Tall and imposing, their armor gleamed menacingly in the dim light. They advanced slowly, weapons trained on the humans. "Stay close," May shouted, firing her rifle. Bullets ricocheted off the alien shields, doing little damage. Her team returned fire, but it was clear they were outnumbered. Thinking quickly, May grabbed a grenade from her belt and hurled it at the ceiling. The explosion caused part of the tunnel to collapse, blocking the Zorathians' path. Dust filled the air as the team ran for their lives, emerging into the ruined streets above. Back at Vault Omega, Elena waited anxiously for news from the teams. Each passing hour felt like an eternity. She paced the chamber, her mind replaying worst-case scenarios. What if they failed? What if the Zorathians intercepted them? What if her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps? May and her team staggered into the room, coughing and covered in dirt. May handed over the fragment, her expression grim. "They know we're looking for something," she said. "They're hunting us now." Before Elena could respond, another team arrived, carrying the fragment from Siberia. Their faces were pale, their clothes torn. Raj explained what had happened, his hands trembling as he recounted the chase through the storm. Despite the danger, progress was being made. 2 fragments were now secured. Only 2 remained. High above Earth, Admiral Yarick Voss watched as the remnants of the eclipse drifted lifelessly through space. His sacrifice had not been in vain. The flagship of the Zorathian fleet had sustained significant damage, forcing the invaders to regroup. Though the human orbital defenses were all but destroyed, the delay gave those on the ground precious time. Voss's final act of defiance inspired others. Across the planet, pockets of resistance began to form. Civilians armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find. Farmers used tractors to block roads. Hackers infiltrated Zorathian communication networks, spreading misinformation and sowing confusion. In Geneva, Elena and her team prepared for the next phase of their mission. The remaining fragments were located in highly contested areas, one in the heart of Paris, the other beneath the sands of the Sahara Desert. Retrieving them would be even more dangerous than before, but Elena refused to give up. As she stared at the fragments they had already recovered, she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. Humanity had always been resilient, always found a way to endure. Even now, amidst the chaos and destruction, there was hope. Hope that Aegis would awaken. Hope that Earth would rise again, and hope that when the Zorathians realized what humanity was capable of, it would already be too late, somewhere beyond the stars. Emperor Kelver monitored the situation with growing frustration. The humans were proving far more troublesome than anticipated. Their resistance was fierce, their spirit unyielding. He clenched his fists, vowing to crush them once and for all. Little did he know, humanity's greatest weapon was about to reveal itself. And when it did, the Zorathian Empire would learn why you never underestimate the will to survive. The fragments of the encryption key were slowly coming together, but the cost of retrieving them was mounting. Each mission brought new dangers, new losses, and new reminders of how fragile humanity's resistance truly was. Yet, amidst the chaos, something unexpected began to emerge. Unity. In Geneva, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked tirelessly to piece together the fragments already recovered. The first two cubes rested on a table in the center of Vault Omega, their surfaces shimmering faintly as if alive. When placed near each other, they emitted a low hum, vibrating in harmony. Elena stared at them, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew that activating Aegis would require not just the physical fragments, but also cooperation on a scale humanity hadn't seen in generations. Outside the vault, the world was falling apart. Zorathian ground forces had established footholds in major cities, turning Earth into a battlefield. Resistance fighters clashed with alien troops in the streets, using guerrilla tactics to slow their advance. Civilians fled in terror, leaving behind homes and lives shattered by war. The invaders showed no mercy, destroying everything in their path. But amidst the destruction, stories of courage began to spread. In Paris, a group of teenage hackers infiltrated a Zorathian communications hub, temporarily disabling their surveillance systems. In South America, farmers used old tractors to create makeshift barricades, delaying an alien convoy long enough for survivors to escape. Even small acts of defiance, like painting messages of hope on crumbling walls, became symbols of humanity's refusal to give up. Back in Geneva, Elena realized that activating Aegis wasn't just about technology. It was about people. The weapon required vast amounts of energy, which meant power grids across the globe would need to be rerouted. Factories would have to repurpose themselves overnight to produce components needed for the system. Ordinary citizens would have to risk their lives transporting materials through enemy lines. It was a daunting task. But Elena believed it could be done if humanity came together. To make this happen, she turned to Captain Marcus Kane. Though their relationship had been strained from the start, Elena knew Kane's military expertise would be crucial. He had spent years leading soldiers in conflicts around the world, and his ability to organize and motivate others was unmatched. Kane listened silently as Elena explained her plan. When she finished, he crossed his arms and frowned. "You're asking for miracles," he said bluntly. "Half the planet is either under Zorathian control or too scared to fight back. How do you expect to pull this off?" "We don't have a choice," Elena replied, her voice firm. "If we don't try, we lose everything. Every life, every city, every future we've ever dreamed of, it all ends." For a moment, Kane didn't respond. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said. "But it won't be easy." Together, they devised a strategy. Using what remained of global communication networks, they broadcast a message to anyone still listening. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez," the recording began. "We've found a way to fight back, but we can't do it alone. We need everyone, every nation, every company, every person to work together. If we stand united, we can win." The response was overwhelming. Governments that had once refused to cooperate now shared resources and intelligence. Corporations opened their doors, offering factories and equipment free of charge. Ordinary citizens volunteered en masse, forming supply chains and relaying information. For the first time in decades, humanity acted as one. Meanwhile, the remaining fragments of the encryption key were retrieved in daring missions that pushed the limits of human endurance. The third fragment was hidden beneath the ruins of Paris. The city was a wasteland, its iconic landmarks reduced to rubble. Zorathian patrols roamed the streets, their glowing weapons casting eerie shadows on the walls. To retrieve the fragment, a team led by Sergeant Mei Lin had to navigate a labyrinth of underground tunnels while avoiding detection. The journey was treacherous. The tunnels were dark and unstable, filled with debris from collapsed ceilings. Every step echoed loudly, threatening to alert nearby enemies. May moved cautiously, her rifle raised and her senses sharp. Behind her, her team followed closely, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Finally, they reached the chamber containing the fragment. It was guarded by a squad of Zorathian shock troopers, their armor gleaming menacingly in the dim light. May signaled for her team to take cover, then devised a plan. Using smoke grenades, they created a diversion, drawing the troopers away from the entrance. While they were distracted, May slipped inside and grabbed the fragment dot as she emerged. Clutching the cube tightly, the troopers realized they'd been tricked. They charged toward her, weapons blazing. May fired back, her shots finding their marks with deadly accuracy. Her team joined the fight, covering her retreat as they ran for the surface dot. By the time they reached safety, they were exhausted and injured, but victorious. The third fragment was secure. The final fragment was buried deep beneath the sands of the Sahara Desert. Retrieving it required navigating a harsh environment where temperatures soared during the day and plummeted at night. The mission was led by Raj Patel, the engineer who had helped retrieve the Siberian fragment. Raj's team traveled in modified vehicles designed to withstand extreme conditions. They drove for hours, their tires kicking up clouds of dust as they searched for the hidden site. When they finally arrived, they discovered it was heavily guarded by Zorathian drones equipped with advanced sensors. "We'll never get close enough," one of the soldiers muttered. Shaking his head, "Yes, we will," Raj replied. He pulled out a device he had been working on, a portable EMP generator, capable of disabling electronic systems. "Cover me while I set this up." Under the cover of darkness, Raj crept toward the perimeter, planting the EMP device near a cluster of drones. As soon as it activated, the machines froze, their lights flickering before going dark. Seizing the opportunity, the team rushed forward, digging through the sand until they uncovered the entrance to the underground chamber. Inside, they found the final fragment resting on a pedestal. Raj carefully wrapped it in cloth and placed it in his pack. Just as they were about to leave, alarms blared, signaling the return of the drone systems. The team sprinted for their vehicles, narrowly escaping as the machines resumed their pursuit, with all 4 fragments secured. The focus shifted back to Vault Omega. Engineers worked around the clock to integrate them into Aegis, repairing damaged circuits and calibrating the system. Soldiers patrolled the perimeter, ready to defend the facility against any attack. Civilians contributed in whatever ways they could, whether by delivering supplies or standing guard. Tensions ran high as the deadline approached. Arguments broke out between team members, stress manifesting in sharp words and heated exchanges. Elena and Kane clashed repeatedly, their differing approaches to leadership causing friction. Elena favored careful planning and collaboration, while Kane believed in direct action and decisive moves. One evening, after yet another disagreement, Kane confronted Elena in private. "You think you can fix everything with science," he said, his tone accusatory. "But sometimes you just need to act. You need to fight." "And sometimes," Elena shot back, "fighting without thinking gets people killed. We're running out of time, Marcus. If we don't work together, none of this matters." Their conversation ended abruptly, but both left with a newfound understanding of the other's perspective. From that point on, they made an effort to compromise, combining their strengths to keep the project moving forward. Above Earth, the Zorathians grew increasingly frustrated. Despite their overwhelming superiority, humanity continued to resist. Emperor Kelver watched footage of skirmishes and sabotage efforts, his expression darkening with each report. "How are they still fighting?" he demanded of his advisors. "They should have surrendered by now." His commanders offered no answers. To them, the humans' persistence was baffling. They lacked the technology, the resources, and the numbers to pose a real threat. And yet they refused to give up. Unbeknownst to Calver, Humanity's greatest weapon was not a machine or a strategy. It was something far more powerful: hope. Hope fueled by unity, sacrifice, and the belief that even in the face of impossible odds, victory was still possible. As the final preparations for Aegis neared completion, Elena stood in the control room, staring at the relic. Its satellites hung suspended in midair, connected by thick cables pulsing with energy. She thought of all the lives lost, all the sacrifices made to bring them to this moment. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. There was no time for grief, not yet. Outside, the Zorathians prepared for their final assault. They believed they were on the verge of victory, unaware that humanity had one last surprise waiting for them. And somewhere beyond the stars, the universe held its breath, watching as the stage was set for the battle that would determine Earth's fate. The moment of truth had arrived. After weeks of relentless effort, Aegis was finally ready to be activated. The relic stood in the heart of Vault Omega, its satellites glowing faintly as they drew power from Earth energy grids. Engineers bustled around the control panel, making final adjustments while Dr. Elena Vasquez watched intently. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were sharp and focused. Outside, the world braced for what was to come. Zorathian forces tightened their grip on occupied territories, preparing for their final assault. Emperor Calver's fleet loomed menacingly in orbit, its ships spreading across the sky like a dark cloud. Humanity's defenders knew that Aegis alone couldn't save everyone. It was powerful, but its range was limited. To maximize its impact, they needed a plan that would lure the Zorathians into a position where Aegis could strike with full force. Elena proposed a risky strategy: deception. Using hacked communication channels, the Resistance broadcast false intelligence suggesting that Earth's leadership intended to evacuate via a secret lunar base. If successful, the Zorathians would concentrate their forces near the moon, placing them squarely within Aegis's kill zone. It was a gamble, one that required perfect timing and flawless execution. But it was humanity's best shot at victory. Captain Marcus Kane led the effort to sell the ruse. Under his command, a small fleet of outdated human ships gathered near the moon, broadcasting signals meant to mimic preparations for a mass evacuation. These ships were little more than decoys, equipped with minimal defenses and loaded with automated systems designed to self-destruct if captured. Their mission was simple: draw the Zorathians away from Earth and buy time for Aegis to do its work. As the decoy fleet moved into position, Kane addressed his crew over the comms. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the odds. "We're not coming back from this. But if we can keep the Zorathians busy long enough for Aegis to fire, we'll have done our job." His words hung heavy in the air, but no one argued. Every member of the crew understood the stakes. They were willing to sacrifice everything for the slim chance of saving Earth. Meanwhile, Elena worked tirelessly in Vault Omega, ensuring Aegis was primed for activation. The system required precise calibration to channel solar energy without destabilizing Earth's climate further. Even a slight miscalculation could result in catastrophic consequences. She ran simulations again and again, each time tweaking variables until she was confident the weapon would function as intended. Her team supported her every step of the way, though tensions remained high. Arguments broke out frequently, fueled by exhaustion and fear. At one point, an engineer snapped at Elena, accusing her of pushing them too hard. For a moment, the room fell silent, the weight of their collective stress hanging thick in the air. But Elena met his gaze calmly. "We're all tired," she said quietly. "But if we stop now, none of this matters. We owe it to everyone who fought and died to see this through." Her words struck a chord. Slowly, the tension eased, replaced by renewed determination. Together, they pushed forward, knowing there was no turning back. Above Earth, the Zorathians took the bait. Emperor Calver studied the transmissions intercepted from the decoy fleet, his lips curling into a cold smile. So, they think they can escape? He sneered. Let them try. We will crush them before they reach the moon. With a wave of his hand, he ordered the bulk of his armada to converge on the decoy fleet. The massive ships surged forward, their engines glowing brightly against the blackness of space. As they closed in on the moon, Kane's crew prepared for their final stand. Fire everything! Kane shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Missiles streaked toward the Zorathian ships, exploding in bursts of light. The aliens retaliated instantly, their energy beams slicing through the decoy vessels like paper. One by one, the human ships disintegrated, but not before buying precious seconds for Aegis to charge. Back on Earth, Elena gave the order to activate the weapon. Initiate sequence, she commanded, her voice firm despite the knot of fear in her stomach. Technicians entered commands into the control panel, their fingers flying over keyboards. Lights blinked rapidly as Aegis powered up, drawing energy directly from the sun. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar, beams of concentrated solar energy shot into space. Brighter than 1,000 suns, they tore through the darkness, striking the Zorathian fleet with devastating force. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, their hulls unable to withstand the raw power of Aegis. Entire squadrons were wiped out in seconds, leaving behind only debris and silence. On board the flagship, Emperor Calver stared in disbelief as his once invincible armada crumbled before his eyes. His advisors scrambled to respond, shouting orders and analyzing data, but it was too late. The humans had turned the tide of the battle, and they weren't done yet. As the surviving Zorathians attempted to regroup, humanity launched its counterattack. Resistant fighters rose up en masse, attacking alien ground forces with renewed vigor. Civilians joined the fight, using whatever weapons they could find to reclaim their cities. Guerrilla tactics proved especially effective, with small teams ambushing larger enemy patrols and disappearing into the shadows before reinforcements could arrive. In Geneva, Elena watched footage of the battles unfolding around the globe. Tears streamed down her face as she saw ordinary people standing shoulder to shoulder, fighting for their homes and their future. Despite the destruction and loss, there was a sense of unity and purpose that hadn't existed before. Humanity wasn't just resisting anymore, it was fighting back. Kane's decoy fleet had been obliterated, but his sacrifice hadn't been in vain. The diversion had given Aegis the opportunity it needed to unleash its full potential. Now, the Zorathians were reeling, their confidence shattered by the realization that humanity still had some fight left in it. Admiral Yarrick Voss's name became legend among the resistance. Though his ship, the Eclipse, had been destroyed during the earlier assault on the flagship, rumors spread that he had survived. Survivors claimed to have seen him leading guerrilla attacks against Zorathian patrols, inspiring others with his courage and determination. Whether or not these stories were true didn't matter. What mattered was the hope they instilled in those still fighting in the final hours of the battle. Voss or someone claiming to be him led a daring raid on a Zorathian supply depot. Armed with crude explosives and sheer audacity, his team managed to destroy enough resources to cripple the invaders' operations in the region. The attack served as a rallying cry for the resistance, proving that even the smallest victories could make a difference. By the time the dust began to settle, the Zorathian Empire was in disarray. Their fleet had been decimated, their ground forces pushed back to isolated strongholds. Emperor Calver refused to surrender, vowing to retake Earth no matter the cost. But his subordinates were less certain. Many began questioning the wisdom of continuing the invasion, wondering if humanity was worth the price. Alana stood in the control room of Vault Omega, watching as reports poured in from across the globe. Cities were still burning, and millions had perished, but the tide had turned. For the first time since the invasion began, there was a glimmer of hope. She turned to her team, her expression resolute. "This isn't over," she said. "We've won a battle, but the war is far from finished. We need to finish what we started." Around her, heads nodded in agreement. They were battered and bruised, but they weren't broken. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger for it. Somewhere beyond the stars, the remnants of the Zorathian Empire regrouped, licking their wounds and plotting their next move. They had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make the same mistake twice, but for now, Earth belonged to its people. And as long as they stood united, no force in the universe could take it from them. The final battle unfolded with a ferocity that shook the stars. The Zorathian fleet, though battered and diminished, remained a formidable force. Emperor Kelver refused to retreat, his pride wounded by humanity's unexpected defiance. "They are insects," he snarled at his advisors. "Insects who dare to challenge us. We will crush them completely." But the humans were no longer the frightened, divided species they had been when the invasion began. Aegis had proven that Earth still had teeth, and humanity intended to use them. Aegis fired again, its beams slicing through space like blades of light. The remaining Zorathian ships scattered, trying to evade the deadly energy blasts. Some succeeded, darting behind asteroids or using their own destroyed vessels as shields. Others weren't so lucky. Entire squadrons disintegrated in flashes of white-hot fire, leaving behind trails of debris that drifted silently in the void. On board the Zorathian flagship, Kelver paced furiously, his claws clicking against the metal floor. He could feel the tide turning, his empire's grip on Earth slipping away. For centuries, the Zorathians had conquered without challenge, their advanced technology ensuring swift victories. But humanity was different. They fought not just with weapons, but with something intangible spirit. It infuriated him. "We must regroup," he barked at his commanders. "Focus all remaining forces near the moon. If we can hold that position, we can still win." His orders were relayed across the fleet, and what remained of the Armada surged toward the moon once more. But this time, they weren't alone. Human resistance fighters launched coordinated assaults from hidden bases, targeting supply lines and communication hubs. Small teams of pilots flew outdated craft, weaving between larger ships and firing missiles before disappearing into the darkness. Every hit mattered. Every strike weakened the invaders further. Back on Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the situation from Valdomega. Her face was pale, her body trembling from exhaustion, but her eyes burned with determination. Activating Aegis repeatedly took a toll, not just on her team but on the planet itself. Each blast destabilized Earth's climate, triggering storms and earthquakes. Yet she knew there was no other choice. Stopping now would mean surrender, and humanity wasn't ready to give up. "Charge it again," she ordered, her voice hoarse but firm. Technicians scrambled to comply, rerouting power and recalibrating systems. The satellites hummed louder, their glow intensifying as they prepared for another shot. Captain Marcus Kane stood beside her, his expression grim. He had lost count of how many lives had been sacrificed in the past hour. Soldiers, civilians, even children, but he pushed those thoughts aside. There would be time to grieve later. Right now, they had a war to win. "Elena," he said quietly, "you need to rest. You're pushing yourself too hard." She shook her head. "I can't stop. Not yet. If I do, everything falls apart." Kane didn't argue. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. Together, they watched as Aegis unleashed another volley of energy, obliterating a cluster of Zorathian cruisers. Cheers erupted in the control room, but they were short-lived. Everyone knew the fight wasn't over. Amidst the chaos, pockets of hope emerged. In New York City, survivors rallied around a group of engineers who had repurposed abandoned buildings into makeshift shelters. Solar panels scavenged from rooftops powered generators, providing electricity to those hiding underground. In Tokyo, a network of tunnels became a refuge for thousands, protected by volunteer guards armed with crude weapons. Even in the ruins of Paris, graffiti appeared on crumbling walls. "We are still here." These acts of resilience inspired others. Farmers in rural areas used old machinery to block roads, slowing Zorathian ground troops. Hackers infiltrated alien communication networks, spreading misinformation and sowing confusion. Everywhere, people found ways to resist, proving that humanity's strength lay not in technology, but in unity. Admiral Yark Voss became a symbol of this defiance. Though his ship had been destroyed weeks earlier, rumors of his survival spread like wildfire. Survivors claimed to have seen him leading guerrilla attacks, rallying soldiers and civilians alike. Whether these stories were true didn't matter. What mattered was the hope they instilled. Men and women who had never held a weapon before rose up, driven by the belief that victory was possible as the battle raged on. Elena devised a risky plan to end the war once and for all. She proposed broadcasting false intelligence suggesting that Earth's leadership planned to launch a counterattack from a secret lunar base. The message was simple: if you want to stop us, come to the moon. It was a trap, one designed to lure the Zorathians into a position where Aegis could unleash its full potential. The plan worked. Believing the transmission to be genuine, Emperor Calver ordered his remaining forces to converge on the moon. As the fleet approached, human decoy ships positioned themselves strategically, drawing the aliens closer. Meanwhile, Aegis charged for its final strike. "This is it," Elena whispered, her hands gripping the edge of the control panel. One last shot. The technicians nodded, their faces pale but determined. Outside, the sky lit up as Aegis fired, its beams brighter and more powerful than ever before. The Zorathian flagship shuddered under the impact, its armor cracking and engines failing. Explosions tore through its hull, sending shockwaves rippling through the fleet. On board the flagship, Calver roared in fury as alarms blared around him. His advisors scrambled to respond, shouting conflicting orders as systems failed. Finally, with a deafening boom, the ship broke apart, killing everyone aboard, including the Emperor himself. Without their leader, the Zorathian fleet faltered. Ships collided, communications broke down, and panic spread among the crew. Sensing their weakness, human forces launched a final assault. Fighters swarmed the invaders, targeting key vessels until nothing remained but wreckage drifting in the emptiness of space. When the dust settled, Earth was scarred but free. Cities lay in ruins, their streets littered with debris and ash. Billions had perished, and millions more were displaced. The cost of victory was staggering, but humanity had endured. In Geneva, Elena stood in the control room of Vault Omega, staring at Aegis. Its satellites were silent now, their glow faded. Around her, technicians and soldiers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. They had done the impossible. They had saved Earth, but Elena felt no joy, only an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Aegis had bought them time, but it had also come at a terrible price. The weapon's repeated activations had destabilized Earth's climate, causing hurricanes, droughts, and rising sea levels. The planet would take decades, if not centuries, to recover. "We did it," Kane said softly, breaking the silence. "It's over." Elena nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. "Not completely," she replied. "We've won the battle, but the war isn't truly finished. The Zorathians may return, and even if they don't, we have to rebuild. We owe it to everyone who fought and died to make this world better than it was before." Kane didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked out the window, watching as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds. For the first time in weeks, the sky was clear. Somewhere in the distance, birds chirped, a small but powerful reminder of life's resilience. "You're right," he said finally. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." In the days and weeks that followed, humanity set to work healing its wounds. Governments formed new alliances, pledging to cooperate rather than compete. Factories reopened, producing materials needed to rebuild cities and restore infrastructure. Ordinary citizens came together, sharing resources and supporting one another in ways that hadn't been seen in generations. Aegis became both a symbol of hope and a cautionary tale. Deactivated and sealed away once more, it served as a reminder of humanity's capacity for destruction and its ability to rise above it. Elena returned to her research, determined to ensure that such a weapon would never need to be used again. She poured her energy into developing sustainable technologies, working tirelessly to repair the damage caused by the war. Though she often thought of those who had been lost, she refused to dwell on grief. There was too much work to be done. Far above Earth, the remnants of the Zarthian Empire fled into the depths of space. Survivors whispered warnings of the day they had underestimated humanity, the day they had fallen. Their empire would never recover fully, its hubris shattered by a species willing to risk everything for survival. And somewhere on Earth, amidst the ruins and the rebuilding, humanity looked up at the stars with newfound determination. They had faced extinction and emerged victorious. Now, they vowed to reach beyond their planet, reclaiming their place among the cosmos, not as victims, but as conquerors. For the first time in years, there was hope. Hope that Earth would heal, hope that humanity would endure, and hope that the universe would remember. Why you never underestimate the spirit of a species united in purpose, somewhere beyond the stars. The Zorthians learned a lesson they would never forget. Humanity wasn't just a race, it was a force. And forces like that couldn't be extinguished easily.